Welcome to our podcast. Today we are talking with Mike Irving of Advanced Business Abilities. Mike is a leadership and sales coach who specialises in boosting business growth. He uses his expertise to help executives achieve growth in their leadership and their sales performance. Mike regularly sees up to a 10-fold increase in executive and financial performance using his sales strategies and leadership development techniques. He strongly emphasises the pivotal role of communication in sales, leadership and team dynamics. Mike is here to share how improving communication can improve your business for the better.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. This week I had a very, very special guest. Mike and I have known ourselves for over 2 decades now. We've worked together, and some of the work that Mike's done has really changed my life. And I thought it'd be really great to have Mike on the podcast to share the information of what he does and how powerful it's been for me. I know for me, it's really helped me with my marriage, my friendships, and then, with business over the years of the work that we've done together. And so it's a bit, a lot of people think it's not about an off-grid, What would you say, Mike, that your role and profession is, what you do?
Oh, I have so many ways that I talk about that. Fundamentally, I help people, mostly business owners and sales professionals, but we work with everybody. And we help people to remove the resistance that restricts them from getting what they want. And so we talk a lot about sovereignty and extreme ownership, taking extreme responsibility for everything that you create in your life. That's probably a really good, simple summary.
Yep. Yeah. Well, my mum this week, she asked what you do, and I said, "What do you think he does?" And she says, "He's a financial counselor or something like that."
Oh, that's too funny.
So, but yeah, look, I know the work that we've done together, and I think it's really important to people that do live off grid, and not just even off grid, but in everyday society of dealing with people. It's really helped me with my communication, my intention, and just getting the things in life that I really, really wanted to achieve. So, mate, if you want to tell us a bit more background about what you've done over the years, and
Sure, happy to. The concept of extreme ownership comes from all the books that I used to read in my 20s, and all these books told me that I create my own reality. And I really wanted to believe that, but none of those books went through, this is how you do it. Here's the equation. Here's the system that if you've got this reality right now, that means that you've been doing this, and this. And if you want this reality instead, what you actually want to do is stop doing these 4 things and start doing these 6 things instead. And over time and distance, it'll get you there. So I've been driven for a long time by the question called, how do I create my own reality? That's the thing that I've wanted to understand. And you and I have known each other a long time. In 2006, you know that I met a group of people that I now refer to as the research team, and they helped me really change my life. And they introduced me to a different level of extreme ownership. They basically said to me, well, Mike, you create your own reality. That means that any problem you have, anything that's happening in your life or your business that's not working the way that you would like it to, what's the real source of the problem? And when I thought through that, I went, ooh, bugger, it's me. which is difficult. And thankfully I had enough support to be able to start to confront that more and more and more. I learned loads from that group. There were 3 people involved in that research team, and unfortunately now 2 of them have passed away over the last 17 years. But man, they helped me change my life to the point where I shut down the business I'd been running for 10 years, and I asked them to mentor me. I wanted to learn everything about how they had helped me change in a 6-month period. And I wanted to learn it well enough that no matter who sat down in front of me and no matter what problem or challenge they wanted help with, that I would be able to support them. So now I sit here, I'll say I sit on the shoulders of giants. They've forgotten more than I've learned, but I've been lucky enough to learn a lot over the last 17 years and have lots of experiences of how to help people change what they're creating for themselves in their life and in their business.
Yep. Yeah, I think a lot of people listen to this podcast, that self-sufficiency and sovereignty is sort of a big thing that I think a lot of people could really relate to. So you can tell us more about, like, if I want to be self-sufficient, and sovereign in my own and feeling that thing. I think a lot of my customers, they are self-sufficient, sorry, but they probably just don't feel it.
Yeah, that's sovereignty for me is an emotional and mental, and I would even go so far as to say spiritual approach to life. It starts with how you think. And when you think in that way, you then will create a reality around you that reflects what you think. And sovereignty is not about you telling the government to piss off and they can't control you and raw. That's actually the opposite. Like that's actually putting you in a position of being a victim. Sovereignty is it's about extreme ownership, and that self-sufficiency for me is being able to depend upon yourself. And so I look at it, because obviously you and I talk quite regularly about solar and off-grid particularly, which I love. And when I do set up the property that I'm going to live in for the rest of my life, it will have a solar system. And what that's going to mean is that I have the task of making sure I understand how that whole system works. Because if I don't, then I'm abdicating. Like I'm then giving up my sovereignty, and I'm completely dependent on somebody else coming in to and troubleshoot when problems exist. So taking that sovereign or extreme ownership approach, if people are putting in solar systems and off-grid systems for those reasons, and they take that level of approach where, all right, if I'm going to own this, it's like, in ways, it's like the person who owns the 1969 Chevy Camaro that still has a carburetor on it. The people who really get the most out of those are the ones that understand how the carburetor works, so that they can make sure the car's running the way it's supposed to when it doesn't. And that's about understanding.
Yep. So what steps do you think people could take, like, if they're going to go off this off-grid journey in life and go buy an off-grid property and go off-grid? Like, what do you think the actions? Because I think what I've seen over the years, a lot of the mistakes are made in getting the property or not asking the right questions. So what's some steps you think of people, if they're going to go live this off-grid journey, that they could take to help them on that adventure and make it less frictionless, we'll call it?
Yeah. More frictionless, less full of friction. Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is for every person to think through and be an observer of, well, what are the things that I really thoroughly understand? And then another list of, well, what are the things that, like, I understand a little bit about, but I probably have a lot more questions about. And then a third list of, well, let's think through what are the things that I may not actually have considered yet, that I therefore don't really know that I don't understand. and let's go and talk to somebody who can educate me and help me understand those things. So, even a permaculture design certificate, if I'm going to set up an off-grid property, a permaculture design certificate's a really good base level thing to do that's going to help somebody understand, well, what are the important factors to consider in the purchase of the property? And what are going to be the costs associated with making the property work? The model that I'm thinking with here is a model that applies to every relationship that you have in your life. And the relationships I'm talking about are not just relationships with people. Because we have a relationship with ourselves, and we have a relationship with our environment, and we have a relationship with the things in our environment, and we have a relationship with other people. And all of those relationships are governed by the same model. And there are 4 parts or 4 aspects to this model. So one aspect is, I use the word affinity to describe it. Affinity is the degree of interest, the degree of friendliness or respectfulness that you have for the thing or the person that you're in a relationship with. And that's something for you to choose. It's not something that just happens or doesn't happen, right? It's something for you to make a choice about, and it's a tool for you to develop the skills of using. I remember when I first started working on cars, man, would I crack the shits when the car wouldn't start. An old 1980 model Range Rover or a 1995 Suzuki Sierra, and it all of a sudden wouldn't start on me. And I'd just get pissed off and frustrated and, why won't it work? What I wasn't doing was making sure that I understand the principles of what made it work. I remember a specific moment where it wouldn't start. And the only bloody reason it wouldn't start was because an electrical wire had come off the tip of the starter motor. So of course it wouldn't start, right? But I didn't understand that. That taught me a valuable lesson. It's the simplest things to make sure we understand. And in order to get an understanding, it means maintaining a level of affinity through the process of learning rather than just cracking the shits and being upset and unhappy, and which I used to be pretty good at doing. So if there's affinity, the next thing that happens is some form of communication. And between people, that is the way that we communicate, the tones that we use, intentional and unintended. And when we communicate with affinity, that will then determine and impact understanding and understanding of reality.
Yeah. Yeah, communication. It's I know you've used the example before, but it is one of those things that people think because they talk every day, they know how to communicate effectively. So
yeah, my personal experience is that I think communication is at the same time, so simultaneously, it's the most misunderstood skill or subject on the planet. And it's also the skill that has the most significant false economy. Now, the reason I say that it's the most misunderstood is exactly what you just said. We all communicate all day, every day. And so we gain a false sense of certainty of how good we are at it. And I certainly had that. If you'd asked me back in 2005, 2006, if I was good at communication, I probably would have very arrogantly sworn up one side of you and down the other, telling you how fantastic I was. And it wasn't until the research team sat me down and went, all right, Mike, let's look at what good communication really is. That's the point at which I went, oh, okay, maybe I'm not quite as good at this in all aspects of it as what I thought I was. In fact, wow, look at that. In some areas, I'm really poor. And that was really valuable because it got me to really start looking at it and start inspecting the subtleties that are involved in good communication that a lot of people miss. Now, it's got the most significant false economy because a false economy is where an organization or a person either stops spending on something, chooses not to spend on it, or reduces the spend on it. And they do that in order to get a perceived savings. And it's a false economy because the actual cost of not spending that or investing in that over the long term far outweighs the perceived savings that they thought they were getting initially. Now, there's not many people that invest heavily in time, effort, intention, and also financially in developing their communication skills. This is not really a sexy thing, right? We don't want to build our communication skills. We want more sales. We don't want to build our communication skills. We want to get better at leadership so our business expands. But the thing is that communication skills are the number one most significant skill that impacts sales and sales conversions and leadership and management of people and relationships generally. So it's a really important skill that doesn't get invested in enough. And it's the thing that causes the most problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Misunderstandings.
Yep.
So
Understandings, assumptions, expectations. And an expectation is nothing more than an undiscussed agreement that you're attempting to force onto someone else. It's not an agreement because it hasn't been discussed. And you're attempting to force somebody else because, well, my expectations are or were that you should do this.
Yeah.
And that creates all sorts of issues in communication.
Yep. Yep, totally. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it definitely you know, expectations of going off grid and living, it's funny how people don't want a generator. Just use that as an example. Like, I'm going to be self-sufficient, renewable, no generator, and it's like, what are you going to do when it rains for a week? I'll be fine. You're going to have candles, so
or better yet, I want to go off grid. I don't want to have a generator. I want to be self-sufficient. What do you mean I can't have an induction stovetop and a spa and a hot tub and a pool and run my aircon all the time? What are you talking about? I'm absolutely sure that those expectations will sit in the minds of a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you can have all that, but boy, that's going to like quadruple or quintuple the cost of your solar system in order to be able to make all of that work. If you're happy to do that, fantastic. I can just imagine what my solar system is going to look like towards the end, because I don't know that I have a wife that's going to be willing to deal without some of those things. So, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
So, yeah, I think it's a big thing. A lot of people's expectations outweigh their budget. It's probably a good way to think about it from an off-grid point of view. So, but not even from a financial point of view, I think the expectation of a lot of people think they moved to the country, and there's a lot of people that have moved to the country and gone off grid, and it's solved a lot of the problems. But yeah, there's an expectation if I live out by myself, not with a community, just away from humans in general, life's going to be better. To have that expectation. So, so what do you think it is that for those people that go out and expect it's going to be this big rosy dream thing and they get disappointed? Like, what do you think is the cause of that there that causes people to feel disappointed?
Well, disappointment is always the result of failed expectations. So expectations create disappointments. And usually, and I'd say like 99.9% of the time, if disappointments are created by expectations, what creates expectations? Expectations are created through a lack of good communication, ensuring total understanding. Right? So when I sit down with let's say we're engaging with a large organization. I remember a conversation I had last year with the two directors of a company in Perth, and they employed 250 staff, and they wanted to put their leadership team through one of our programs. So one of the questions I asked them as we went through the process is, right, so tell me, what other expectations do you have that might be sitting in the back of your mind that we haven't yet discussed? Now, why would I ask that question? Well, hopefully that question is going to reveal a few things that they haven't actually said yet, but that sit in the back of their mind that I'm then able to address and discuss and make sure that we get to a place of understanding on those subjects, right? Because if we don't discuss those and they do sit there as expectations and I don't know about them, then it's going to be impossible for me to deliver on them. Now, if I'm wanting to set up an off-grid system, if I'm wanting to set my property up so that I can be off-grid, one of the things that I have spent a lot of time thinking about is, how does somebody ensure as a customer that they get what they want from a service provider or a provider of a product, or both? And one of the things that's really important there, if I want to make sure as the customer that I get what I want, it's really important that I am a good customer. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that I make sure that I thoroughly discuss everything that I want the service or the product to do. I make sure that I thoroughly ask questions to be satisfied within myself that this is going to do the thing that I'm hoping it's going to do. Because if I don't do that, well, then I'm sitting with my own expectations, and I'm putting those expectations on the service provider or the product, the person or company delivering the product. And an undiscussed expectation is going to lead to a disappointment more often than not. Now, again, sovereignty, extreme ownership. Well, that's, to me, I pay marketing agencies lots of money to market our business online. Whether or not they're successful is going to be based around whether or not I make sure that they understand everything that I want it to do. I've been caught so many times where I allowed an expectation to sit there, it didn't get delivered on, and I go, I'm frustrated. Well, the moment I'm frustrated, it's important I look at me, because that's my feeling.
Yeah.
That means I created that somehow. So what did I do or not do? What did I say or not say? What did I do too much of or not enough of that created that situation?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really comes back to a lot of people that question, you create your own reality. And I think a lot of people take responsibility for their reality when things are doing well. But when things are not doing well, there's zero responsibility, So
Well, it's very easy to blame others and be critical of them and what they did or didn't do. And, and for some people, it's a lot easier to do that than others, right? But again, that is oppositional to the concept of sovereignty and extreme ownership.
Yeah.
The world would be a much better place if every single person took extreme ownership of their own feelings, emotions, and realities that they create. Now, not everybody does that.
Yeah. So if I was someone looking to make a change and a difference in my life and think, okay, well, how do I start taking more responsibility for my decisions in my life? Where would I start?
Awesome question. So one of the things that I found incredibly valuable for me was when I met the research team, they had these assessments that they asked me to complete. And that was really valuable for me because it meant that I was going to respond to a ton of questions via an online thing, right? And that was then put through a marking system that is based on data that gave me an understanding of the way I think. And it also gave me the opportunity to look at how I think compared to how really successful people think. And there's, 40 odd years of data sitting there that was comparative data. Now that was super valuable because I couldn't fall back on the position called, well, you think that I do that, but I don't think I do that. I couldn't get upset with somebody else's opinion because they weren't telling me that I was a certain way. It was like I answered the questions, and this is what those questions say about me. Well, I'm the only one that answered the questions, and like that was up for me to confront and inspect about myself. So for me, that was a really awesome starting point, because it really demanded that I inspect the ways that I was creating my own problems. Now, you can also do it by asking people who are really close to you, people who you really trust, but only do that if you really trust those people to give you their honest feedback.
Yeah.
Right. And also know that even when you ask people around you, and even when they make a commitment to give you their honest feedback, remember that the feedback you get from them is going to be coming through their stained glass window view of the world, right? So they have their own resistances and ideas and concepts of how they view the world, and they're going to be giving you feedback through that window.
Yeah.
And that stained glass window will impact what they're able to perceive. I've found it way more valuable to have an objective way of measuring. And look, that's something that we do within Advanced Business Abilities. It's something that we help our clients with. This purpose of this is not to sell our services, it's to be valuable, but that's a starting point. You want to have an objective way of measuring how are you thinking? How are you creating in your world? And I found that to be incredibly valuable for me.
Yep. So just on that there, I just had a thought of, if you're trying to get advice from someone and sort of how to measure whether, like the thought I had was their terminology of whether their intention is, to give you true honest feedback. And the thought I just had there, I thought I might share this and maybe we get in that path of, the 4 words, if people are saying to people, you should do this, you should be doing this, or, so yeah, do you want to elaborate more on the need to, have to, should, got to, must? I think that could be, if you're communicating with someone and trying to get some advice from someone to help you out in the right direction, if they're using that terminology, what does that mean for you?
Yeah. So the phrases that you're referring to are have to, need to, should, gotta, and must. And those phrases create the opposite of sovereignty. Those phrases create a situation where every time a person uses those phrases, they're abdicating their decision-making position. And so if I say those phrases to myself, I'm instantly stepping off the throne, because I'm telling myself that I have no choice. I should be doing this. I have to do that. And the main point here is that it's never, ever, ever, ever true. Like there is nothing that exists where you do not have a choice. You always, always, always have choice. You might not like the consequences of all the choices that are available to you. In fact, you might not like the consequences of any of the choices that are available to you, but that does not change the fact that you have a choice. And so often what people will do is, with the best of intentions, they'll give advice to others, and that advice comes in the form of, Mike, you should be doing this. Well, when that happens in my world, I understand that that might be coming with the best of intentions. I also understand that sometimes it doesn't. And either way, the way that I translate it is that they're pointing out a choice that I could make. And it's my choice. It's up to me to decide that or to decide not to do that. And often what will happen is, people will say, oh, you really should do this, or you should consider doing this. If I then go and do that and it doesn't work out, if I have any sense of frustration towards them because they gave me the idea, well, that's my problem. That's not their problem. That's my issue. I didn't fully consider and make the choice from the position of being on the throne myself. And that's where we get ourselves into trouble.
Yeah.
That's not extreme ownership.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So when you talk about being on the throne, you're saying that you are the king or the queen of your realm, and you make all the decisions in your realm in your life.
Yeah, another way of talking about it is um, you life is like a pinball machine. And so with a pinball machine, you are either the ball in the machine, and if you're the ball, that means you're getting whacked by the fingers in the machine in the game, and you're getting sent all over the game, right? Or you're actually the person standing in front of the machine, pressing the buttons, making the fingers move, and therefore intentionally directing the ball around the machine. If you're the ball in the machine, life is something that happens to you. You're at effect. And you can choose to be there, or you can choose to step out and be an observer and sit on the throne and choose when you're going to press the buttons to move the fingers to move the ball around the machine. Now, the difficult thing here is you're either at cause or you're at effect. But the difficult thing is to recognize that even when you're at effect, you're at cause. You've put yourself at effect. You've chosen that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if I'm someone, I feel like, life's just not working, everything's going wrong, biblical floods coming into my life, just taking everything away from me. So
Which does happen sometimes, right? Like you can feel that way sometimes.
Yeah. So what's a step you think I could take, sit at home, I feel like I'm someone just everything's going wrong, nothing's working for me. What would I start to look at to go, right, I want to make a difference in my life and become more in control of the things that happen in my life?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing that I would do is I would, number one, just check in with the way that I'm breathing. A lot of people take really shallow breaths and they activate their flight, fight, faint, freeze mechanism without knowing they're doing it. So drop your breath down to your belly. Take what I call a centered breath. It's not necessarily a bigger breath. It's just a breath that goes into your belly, and breathe that way consistently. And while I'm doing that, what I'd recommend that somebody does is start to list off the things that you have done. Start to list off the things that you said you would do that you have actually done. And as you list off each of those things, ask yourself whether or not you have acknowledged yourself for doing the thing you said you would do. Now, there's a key component in this, because naturally what we tend to do is jump to evaluate. Did it produce what I wanted it to? Did I do it well? Did I do a good job? It's not about that. It's just, did you take the action you said you would take? And if you did, have you acknowledged yourself for doing what you said you would do? What that will do is start to put you into a sense of reality of, well, I've actually done all these things. I've taken all these steps. I have put all of these efforts in. And acknowledging yourself is the number one way to build affinity with yourself. It's the number one way to build self-esteem, to build a good feeling that you can have with yourself. Because when we're sitting feeling like, the floods have come and like everything's going wrong, nothing's working, everything's going wrong, nothing's happening for me, we don't have a very good feeling with ourselves when that's the case. So the key is to build the good feeling first. It's very difficult to create what we want if we're not feeling very good.
Hmm.
So that's where I would start. And I'm talking even like the simplest things. You know, you wake up in the morning and you choose to have a shower, brush your teeth, make yourself some eggs for breakfast. Okay. Well, you did that. Have you acknowledged yourself for having a shower and brushing your teeth and making yourself some eggs for breakfast? It's like a cycle. So everything in life happens in cycles. And when we make a commitment to do something, we're opening a cycle. We're starting a cycle. We're beginning a cycle. We're making something move. The second part of a cycle is continuation. So we start something moving and we continue it moving. And then the end of a cycle is when we stop it. It ends, it finishes, it completes. A simple example of that is in communication. So if I ask you, hey, Mike, is water wet?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, if I ask that question again, hey, Mike, is water wet?
Yeah.
You can feel it, can't you?
Yeah.
So the first example, I asked the question, you answered, and I acknowledged your response. And that acknowledgement ends that cycle. It's like that conversation's over. It's finished. There's nothing more to say, right? But in the second example, I didn't acknowledge, and man, it felt weird, didn't it? And I'd known you for 20 odd years, but it still felt weird, right? So if there's not an acknowledgement, it leaves the cycle open, incomplete, and that feels off. It doesn't work. When we make a commitment to do something and we then do it, if we don't acknowledge ourselves for having done it, man, we're leaving the cycle open. It's going to create a very similar feeling to what just happened there. And that's one of the most common things I see.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you're a business owner of a $60 million a year annual turnover company, or if you are the janitor at the local school. That principle applies. It doesn't matter what your role is. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It's that principle applies. And if you want to change your life, the first thing to start doing is taking more ownership over how you feel and making sure you're acknowledging yourself rather than waiting for other people to acknowledge you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely off grid, and it's a lot of people, just plant a garden bed or do this sort of stuff, and they get really down on themselves. It doesn't work out, but it's you did what you said you're going to do, and you did your part of it, and it's about acknowledging that to make yourself feel good about that.
I can relate to that. I remember the last garden I had in Perth, and how pissed off I was that the bloody slugs and the snails came in and ate all my cabbage, right? I was livid. And it was really easy to not acknowledge myself for the fact that I'd done all that work, and right, next time I'm going to work out what to do about the slugs and the snails so they don't eat my cabbage.
Got a chicken deficiency, mate.
That's right, exactly.
Okay, so acknowledging yourself, and yes, that's going to help build your self-esteem. So, yeah, what would the next step be?
So if you acknowledge yourself and if you do it consistently, you're going to alter the way that you feel about yourself, and you're going to build that self-esteem. You're going to build a momentum and a platform for you that raises you up, and you're creating that platform. So the next thing is to be very aware of the choices that you're making. And we spoke about these 5 phrases earlier. I have to, I need to, I should, gotta, and must. I personally recommend that you make a commitment to yourself to be aware of your use of those phrases, because those phrases don't serve you as the sovereign, as the king or the queen that sits on the throne. Those phrases don't serve you. And what you'll find is that on the subjects or the topics where you have resistance that affects your thinking, those phrases will come out more. So when you're thinking about or talking about something that you have resistance on, you'll find those phrases will be more prevalent in your thinking. They are restrictive. They are the phrases of suppression, I will say. And if you're a sovereign being, the only one who can suppress you is you. And those phrases are a way that you do that.
Yeah.
So all of that involves being an observer of yourself, being an observer of how you feel, being an observer of the thoughts and words that you're using, being an observer of how those thoughts and words impact you and the way that you feel. You know, every battle is won here before you even enter into battle. And the jail that we live in is created by our own mind.
Yeah.
An off-grid solar system isn't a get out of jail free card. It'll be helpful. It'd be great to have your own power station. Yeah, am I making sense? Is this?
Yeah. No, definitely. So yeah, so yeah. So with those 5 words or 4 words, you know, so it's an example of, you know, if I find myself using those instead of, you know, I can acknowledge that as an example to say, hey, look, you're being more of aware that you're using those words and then acknowledging that you've spotted yourself using them.
Yeah, and then ask yourself whether or not it's true. So do I have to put the bins out? Well, no, that's not true. So therefore, what's the truth? What am I really actually communicating here?
Yeah.
And what
Yep.
choice am I making?
That's a good one, because last night was bin night for me, and it was like, you know, I'm going to put the bins out. Otherwise, yeah, I'll have 2 full bins for another week. So I could have chose to left them, and you know, there has been moments where I couldn't be bothered to get out of bed and think I'll get up in the morning before the bin guy gets there, and I've missed him. You know, and then I'm in a situation where if I want them emptied, I put them in the van, take them down the tip, and deal with that. You know, but it's just realizing that it was all a choice of mine and created that situation.
Yeah. Whereas if you approach that situation going, oh, to put the bins out, well, then you've created a whole bunch of emotions. And I've been specific there. You have created a whole bunch of emotions because you've given yourself a perception that you don't have a choice. Extreme ownership. Any emotion you feel, you created it, didn't you?
Yep.
So it's taking that viewpoint, recognizing that you're creating it, starting to learn what are the ways that you create it and what can you do differently.
So would it be a truth to say that if I'm feeling an emotion of something that is not me?
Well, are you your emotions?
No.
So is it you?
No, it's not.
Yeah. It's really easy to misidentify those and go, I am angry. But the moment you do that, you're now taking on the beingness of angry. And so you're going to be stuck. Just observe the presence of the feeling of anger.
Yeah.
I'm experiencing the presence of the feeling of anger. You can then choose what you're going to do with it. You can choose to hold on to it. You can choose to become it. You can choose to allow it to be there. You can choose to let it go. It's up to you. You have a whole bunch of choices available to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was one thing that was big for me when we first started working together was how long I held on to an emotion, for. There was a, period of time in my earlier days where, my early 20s, that I could go a week or two feeling angry or frustrated or emotional. And, just before the floods, I know we'd been to work a lot together, and, I could sometimes deal with emotion in minutes or seconds, or just choose to go, yep, I don't want to experience that, and I'll let it go, so
Mhm.
definitely a very powerful tool to be able to be in choice and not experience that. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is, we're very much talking about emotional intelligence here, right? And that's not an easy level of intelligence to develop.
yeah.
Back in 2006, I wouldn't have said this back then, but I can see now, looking back, that in 2006, my emotional intelligence level on a scale of 0 to 10 was at best a 0.5.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't have said that back then about myself, because my arrogance was a 10. But that's my point here, right? Emotional intelligence is a big part of taking on a sovereign mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. So, yeah, it's essentially like just the examples I've had over the years of, when I've had to deal with a customer that's really frustrated, because they forgot to put petrol in their generator, or, plug the bloody thing in, and they're upset with me. So it's been the customers I can talk through quickly, ask the questions, and get them to spot and realize that, yep, they were the ones that didn't put the diesel in the generator, because I can't keep doing that. So yeah, the people that take ownership and responsibility, they're a lot easier and better to deal with than the people that don't take any responsibility for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. And
So,
and same goes in every area of life, right? That's why I said earlier, if more people took a point of view of extreme ownership, there'd be a lot less problems in the world, right? Not everybody does that, but I certainly hope that for your listeners that this has been a valuable conversation and thought-provoking. And I'm a huge fan of off-grid living and what you've been teaching and delivering to people for years now. It's hugely valuable and gives people more choices than they would have otherwise. And I really hope that this is valuable for them to listen to and think about. And yeah, man, thanks for having me on the podcast. I've really enjoyed the chat.
no, all good. It's been good, mate. So, I think we'll have to get you back to, or have to.
Well spotted.
Okay. Acknowledge. Thank you. So, yeah, we'll get you back on to finish, because we only covered the two fundamentals of a building relationship. So, yeah, continue that conversation next time. So,
I would love to. And just for a bit of insight there, we talked about affinity and communication. The other two are understanding and reality, or degree of shared reality. So, mate, would love to come back on. And yeah, man, thanks heaps. It's been awesome.
sounds good. We'll come back and finish that.
Cool.
Thanks, mate.
Pleasure, man.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and found the content educational and inspiring. If you got something out of it and you think you know someone else that would actually also enjoy it, we'd really appreciate if you could share the link with them and encourage them to check out our channel. And don't forget, you can join the Off-Grid Tribe podcast for free, where you can actually ask and interact with myself and also our guest speakers. So jump over today to offgridtribe.com, register yourself an account where you can actually have a conversation with myself and one of our guest speakers, and we can continue the conversation there. Together, let's embrace the power of sustainable living.